Welcome back to the Austin Rhodes Show. I've been having fun guest hosting. It's Phil Kent sitting in for Austin. And I've got a very special guest, a friend of mine. It is former U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler. And she has been a busy lady since she left the U.S. Senate, has come back and is organizing over the issues that are very important, and that is registering more voters and strengthening election transparency and integrity, I guess is the best way to phrase it. She is running a group called Greater Georgia. Hello, former Senator Kelly Loeffler. How are you?
Well, hello, Phil. It's great to be with y'all tonight. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you're welcome. And as I just said, you've been very busy. I think, I guess the first thing is, why don't you give our listeners a report on what you're doing with your Greater Georgia group?
Yeah, glad to do it. So Greater Georgia is an organization, a nonprofit, a 501c4 that I started that I'm largely donating my time and resources to stand up against what I saw firsthand in 2020, the forces kind of acting against us on the left. We were outraised, out-organized, outmaneuvered, and really I just couldn't stand by and let that happen. I think Georgia is a red state. I'm not going to stand by and watch it turn blue. I decided to do what I did as a kid growing up on a farm or as a business person in the workforce, and to get to work on solving the problems. And I just came to the realization you don't have to be a politician to make a difference. And I really think it's everyday people, those of us who are living in the real world, who are subject to these big government socialist policies, that have to stand up and say enough. So I started Greater Georgia really to mobilize and organize and give conservatives a voice, because that's why I went to Washington in the first place, was to be a voice for people back home in Georgia who felt like they didn't have a voice. And really I saw three groups that we needed to get to, which was the unregistered, of which there are hundreds of thousands of unregistered conservatives in Georgia. We have about 350,000 disenfranchised Georgians. In other words, about that many did not come back out and vote in January for the runoff, but they voted in November. And then we've got hundreds of thousands of disengaged Georgians. That means they're registered, but they haven't voted in at least the last two election cycles. And so we need to get these folks back. They're part of this process. Their voice is so important. And if we organize and build these coalitions, we can take back our state pretty quickly.
Well, I think that's a very compelling mission there. And Kelly, I think that you had a success in a suburban area of Cobb County. The Democrats have been crowing that they're getting more votes in these suburban areas and that Republican votes are hemorrhaging. But you turned that narrative around with the election of Representative Devin Seabaugh in this Cobb County suburban area. Tell the listeners a little bit about how you targeted and how the vote came out.
Well, that's a great example, because that brought all three of our efforts together: election integrity, voter registration, and mobilization into one race. House District 34 was a special election this summer. There was actually a runoff to it, so there were two, June and July, up in suburban Atlanta and Cobb County. And we did just what I talked about. We went out and registered those that were unregistered. We brought folks back that had not come back in January because they were frustrated at elections and they were angry about the way the election had been run in our state. And then we made sure we got the vote out. And that resulted in a significant improvement. We brought 23% of the voters that wouldn't have been there had we not had our effort. Fair Fight and Stacey Abrams endorsed on the other side in that race. And we ended up expanding our margin of victory even over 2020 November's outcome. So it shows that when you put together and you organize an effort, that really it's the folks on the ground living in those communities that can go door to door and make sure that neighbors are turning out to vote for these issues. Because we see it. It's education, it's inflation, it's big government socialist spending. And people are saying, how do we stop this? Well, you vote. That's how you do it.
Well, you've obviously collected a lot of data, just including in that example where you pushed up the Republican vote from just what it was last year. And I guess, like you say, it goes back to everything from old-fashioned door knocking and social media efforts. Where do you get your volunteers? How did you build this machine, if I may call it that?
Well, we're building based on what I ran across in a statewide race in 21, in 20 and 21, the biggest campaign in Georgia's history, and really used the infrastructure, built a 21 region model where we mobilized locally, got folks on the ground, both paid and volunteer. Very important that you have both, because there are some people that want to do this full time. And keep in mind, Stacey Abrams' payroll last year was $7 million a month.
Wow.
That they're paid off.
Wow.
And so, and she spent about $10 million in the courts changing our election law. So this all takes resources. I'm also investing in data to make sure that we not only have the voter data, but the consumer data, so that we can find those changing trends, whether it's in the suburbs or our rural communities that are so important to the state. Particularly as we celebrate Thanksgiving and think about the bounty that Georgia provides, not just the country, but the world. And so really it just shows by being local, by having those volunteers and leveraging our network that I contributed to Greater Georgia out of my Senate campaign, we can actually make a difference.
Well, I tell you what, you're doing yeoman work, and if we could shift gears a bit to politics, I, for one, miss your voice and vote in Washington and the U.S. Senate for sure, but let's look in the crystal ball, and I'm speaking with Kelly Loeffler, our former U.S. Senator. What do you see happening for 2022, both in Georgia and nationally, with regard to the political trends?
Well, I think we got a glimpse of what might be to come. But I will caveat this with saying we can't be complacent just because we had an unbelievable sweep in Virginia. Virginia, as y'all know, is a blue state. I think Biden won it by at least 10 points. And Glenn Youngkin, Governor-elect Youngkin, had a decisive victory there. Winsome Sears, such a great story, the first Black woman lieutenant governor in that state's history. Republicans flipped the House of Delegates, and it's a great playbook and model. Admittedly, though, Georgia's a very different state, but it just shows that they tried to make this election about something that it wasn't, and it backfired because voters understand elections are about the future, and they don't like where our future's heading. Over half the country says the country's going in the wrong direction, and it was referendum on Biden and a radical agenda that they haven't gotten the message on, by the way, because you see what they're doing with this multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill, trying to jam that through.
Right.
I think Americans are going to continue to reject that, but we've got real work to do if we're going to take all of this and make it positive for the country to learn that elections have consequences, and we're feeling them in our everyday lives, in the grocery store, at the gas pump, when we pay rent, when we want to buy a car, when we want to order Christmas gifts and you can't get them because they're stuck in ports because no one's working. We have 11 million open jobs in the country, 7 million unemployed, red states leading in record low unemployment rates, and it's very clear that
Right.
their agenda is wrong for America.
Well, that's right. And inflation is going to be a huge issue. You've talked about how your group, Greater Georgia, is targeting and registering voters. How are we going to be doing, and I say we, how are we going to be doing in getting the conservatives and Republicans out there motivated? There could be some very divisive Republican primaries. However, as you pointed out before the break, we've got a lot going for us in terms of Joe Biden, for lack of a better phrase, just running the country into the ditch since January. And a lot of people realize that. You mentioned the horrible inflation. Give us your view. Look in the crystal ball and tell us what you think for 2022.
Well, certainly it's upon us. I mean, we're less than a year out, Phil. So this is an important topic now coming out of redistricting. the candidates for these races will start to emerge, and the primaries will take place next year. Qualifying is in the month of March, so it'll be clear who's in these races by the first week. And then, you got the primaries in May, and then the runoffs in June. So we need to start building that infrastructure this year, which is why I've been focused on registering, keeping the 10 up, creating more voices in our movement on the conservative side. But in terms of next year, we can't just rely on the Biden-Harris failed agenda to get our people out. We have to make sure that we are in the community every single day, that we're reaching out to folks that haven't heard from us, diverse, underrepresented communities who believe in the American dream, who want their kids to have a great education so that each generation can have that next opportunity. And that's really what we're fighting for. And so while primaries may be divisive, we all have to understand that if we don't come back together and turn out and support conservatives in November 22, the country's going to go even further off the tracks. And we have a chance to reverse all of this. That's the exciting part, is no matter what you think about what's happening, at any level, local, state, you have a voice in it. And if you don't vote, then it's very hard to have any way of influencing it. So I think we're going to be talking about the issues, importance of school choice, of parents understanding what curriculums their kids are being taught, that we hold Washington accountable for these outrageous bills, spending trillions. This $2 trillion bill that they're trying to push through the House right now has really been potentially scored more like at $5 trillion. Would absolutely swamp the economy.
That's right. And foster inflation. That's right.
Yeah. Inflation. Employers will have a difficult time, particularly small businesses. Think of farmers trying to buy inputs into farming, and the cost of diesel fuel for their tractors going way up.
Right.
And small businesses trying to pay wage increases when inflation's outpacing wage increases. And so the average family of 4 trying to put their kids through school, put food on the table, is not keeping up because of this administration.
Well,
so we just have to make sure to get the message out and have our positive message about opportunity for everyone.
You're making good points, and I think from your point of view, the big opponent, along with the Democrats, is apathy. I don't know about you, and I'm sure you're running into this, but a lot of people, sad to say, are just giving up on both parties. Oh, we can't get anything done, and no one's listening, and the elites are running things. I guess you had mentioned education as part of your group, Greater Georgia. I guess you're running into this.
Yeah, complacency could be an issue. Right now, by being in the field, part of our goal through Greater Georgia, and we'd love to have your listeners go to the website, sign up for our newsletter, sign up to volunteer, get involved, because it's happening across the state. We are that outlet for your frustration. Get involved today, because 2020 can't happen again. We have to make sure that we take advantage of this wave and ride it into 22. But this complacency could be very dangerous. So we just have to continue to engage, to listen, to defend election integrity. Because if we don't have fair elections that people trust, it's very hard to have conversations about other topics that are so important, whether it's standing up for the Second Amendment, whether it's standing up for religious freedom and free speech. And that does get people frustrated when they feel like the media, big tech, corporations don't have their interests. It gets frustrating, but we're here to be a voice and to give people that platform to have a voice going into next year and beyond, because this has to be permanent infrastructure. We can't be transactional with voters and just show up every 2 years. We have to be in the community every single day.
All the time. Well, that's a very compelling message. And the website is greatergeorgia.com to check out what former Senator Loeffler is working on with her team. Thanks again for coming on the show and with your time, and happy Thanksgiving to you and Jeff, and keep up the good work and keep the faith.
Thanks so much, Phil. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Thank you.
Shivani.
Thank you.
All right.